What up, what up, what up? Welcome back to Pnoid News, man. Listen, um, I have been increasingly concerned about the fact that, this economy that we're in and the structure of how we have everything laid out is going to fail miserably. And I've been saying for years that, or at least for the last year, year and a half, 2 years, that nobody's at the helm and they don't have a lot of options. And I've been trying to break that down to y'all the best way that I see possible. So Jimmy Dore had on Richard Wolff, and I know Richard Wolff's a communist, Marxist, blah blah blah. And I feel like exactly, like where everybody's at with that, thing, like I feel like what that is. Okay, I do, but when many points all converge on the same idea, I think we should probably start listening. You know what I mean? So without further ado, I'm gonna get to this video. Let's rock and roll.
Democracy at Work, and he's the author of many books, including his most recent, The System is the Sickness, When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself. Please welcome to the show, Professor Richard Wolff. Good to see
Glad
you.
to be here, Jimmy.
Good to see you. Thanks for coming back to the show. Now, I always wish I had you on speed dial because I always have questions for you. So I had this gentleman on, David Sachs, and we were talking about the banks, the SVP crash and stuff like that. And so he was saying that he wanted them to bail out the banks, meaning he wanted them to cover the depositors, not the investors, and fire all the people running it. But he wanted to save the depositors. Now, what's your take on that whole debacle, by the way? And do you think that was the right course?
Now look here. All right, like when SVB failed and get the name of the other bank that went down, and what they were doing was they were investing with the depositors funds, right? And the depositors funds ended up getting gaffled in the banking thing. So what ended up happening was the FDIC hasn't updated its terms of like how much it covers since like the 1950s, probably. Let's be perfectly honest here, right? And the FDIC is actually like a real insurance thing. If you stay in here and pay a certain amount every month as a bank, and so they cover the deposits in case like your bank gets robbed or like funds get burnt with fire, these type of things, right? Or a bank run, this type of stuff. So with that being said, they stood here and they had like millions of dollars where people like they had this for payroll, these type of things, building funds, whatever, like whatever it is you had to do, paying taxes, tax funds, things of this nature, right? And the FDIC decided, like, hey, look, we have to cover these deposits funds, regardless of whether it's $250,000 or more. And this guy here is going to explain it. Richard Wolff's going to explain it better probably than I can. So let's rock.
Well, I think the place to start is the weird way we handle money. Everybody knows that money makes the world go round. That's why we have phrases like that. We need it. We need it for our business every day. We need to be able to borrow it. We need to be able to have confidence in it. Everybody understands that money is a social institution that we all rely on in more ways than we can count. Okay, if it's a social need for all of us, why in the world would anyone in their right mind create institutions called banks that are in the business of handing out money, managing money, collecting deposits, making loans, when the goal of these institutions is the private profit for their shareholders?
All right. So like this is where me and Marxists disagree about things, right? What we've discovered, right? I follow a economic historian. His name's Mark Blythe, and Mark Blythe has discovered recently that um, Milton Friedman was wrong, and most Austrian economists is wrong about their ideas about how money works. Okay, so here's the premise. Okay, when you put money into a system, right? It matters where you put that money. It's not so much about the amount, it's about where. If I printed off $1 trillion and put it into a locked box, right? And me and you each had $20 before I printed off that, $1 trillion. All that's in the economy, right, is $40. At the end of the day, that's all you have. Like that's the amount of money that's in the economy because it's a locked box, and neither one of us have access to it. So when you get the money to the banks and you have money inside of banks, what ends up happening is banks will give you money if you're credit worthy, right? And banks will control the flow of capital. And in doing so, they'll keep down things like inflation because inflation is actually caused by people having the money to be able to create demand to have goods driven up in price. And also, on the other hand, when people end up demanding more money from companies, they end up having to raise prices to be able to pay for their workers. So ultimately, when you put money in the hands of the people, prices go up, inflation goes up. Premise, okay? Give money to banks, that doesn't happen. Now, it will happen for things like stocks and bonds and capital, ETF funds and things of this nature, things that you're investing in. It might also happen with houses because there's more money is available for loans for houses, the cheaper the cost, right? The more loans are going to give out to build houses, right? And which ends up having, like an effect of where you have more of a demand for a house and you have a ability to build houses. Very simple. Now, it wouldn't be so bad if you didn't have like local authorities telling you who could and could not build houses, whatever the case is, right? These are things that we can have real, actual conversations about. But the truth of the matter is giving money to a bank to be able to, loan out money to control the flow of currency throughout the system. That's why you do it. Because if you just have free flowing currency, right, you end up having people, driving up demand, which ends up setting, like it ends up having inflation just happen immediately. Because that's really where inflation actually comes from. Inflation is not caused by just the creation of money. Inflation is caused by the money being able to have, the people being able to have access to that said currency that you created. Very simple thing. At the end of the day. All right. That's why. Okay. So let's keep rocking. You know what I'm saying? We'll get to where we're going.
And the private profit for the people who set them up. What you're doing is creating social dependency on people who are not there to make this system work. They're there to make money. And they take risks to do that. And if they take those risks and they don't work out, like the Silicon Valley Bank, well, then we get what American history has every few years, a bank collapse. In the 19th century, we used to call them bank panics. That was a better word because it gave you the truth of what was going on here. After each of them, we passed some regulatory laws. Then, in a funny way, they kind of fade away. Banks learn how to get around them. If they need to, they buy the politicians to amend them or to repeal them. And then we get back to square one, and the private banks go in there to make their money. And 5 to 6 to 7 years later, boom.
Okay, so the reason why Silicon Valley Bank failed, right? It's a very basic thing. So when you're loaning out money, right, as a whole currency, right, to whatever investment that you're loaning it out to, because that's what they did. They invested in the Silicon Valley companies. Now, most of these companies, all right, require a massive amount of capital and a long amount of period to like build things up. Like, so let's say, you're creating a new social media platform, right? And what you got to do is you have to first off, like build this thing, right? Then you got to put it up on the web. Then you got to get people to use it. Right, then you got to find a way to have advertisers to be able to monetize it, right? But with all this time, like you have a lot of capital invested in doing all these things, right? Now this is fine if you have 0% interest capital, which we've had for the past like 15 years, right, since 2008. And so what they did was, they assumed that this would continue forever, right? But they still have all these loans out to all these people when all of a sudden the Fed decides we're going to raise fucking interest rates up to 5%. Now all those loans are at 5%. All those investments that they said they make money on at 1 or 2%. Fuck them. Can't borrow money for the cost of what it is to do business anymore. Why these banks fail at the end of the day. Right? That's really what it is. More of these fucking companies and banks are going to fail as you go through. Right? Because with 5% interest, that means when you have to float by for a year, float by for a few months, whatever it is, not only do you have to make the profit to make up for your loss afterwards, you have to make that profit up plus 5%, which means prices have to go up. Which when prices go up, people stop buying shit. People go elsewhere. This is why it is like, we only have a couple companies left. This is some basic shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is going to be a great opportunity, like for new companies to come in. Right. But this is going to be terrible for giant companies who, can't float by on who can't float by on a 5% loan. They just fucking can't do it. So that's kind of what the hell's going on here. Let's keep rocking.
Boom, the system goes again. I mean, you kind of have to scratch your head and say, after this happens over and over again, are you really going to go back to the way things were? And the answer is yes, because that's what's been done every other time. And look, if the private banks making money call the shots, then every one of these is a wonderful example. You call the government in, it cleans up the mess you left behind and sets everything up for this game to be played again.
And so what's the solution? I thought the solution would be like they have, I think in North Dakota, they have state banks.
That's right.
So go ahead, tell people what that is.
Yeah, it's a wonderful example. So I could give you examples from a lot of other countries that have handled this in other ways, but I don't have to. I have a nice state that very few Americans know much about, North Dakota, which over 100 years ago, I believe it was 1916 or around then, set up its own bank. It didn't want the private banks to be doing this game all the time, so they set up a public bank. It was designed to serve the people of North Dakota. It's largely a rural state, so a lot of the lending was for farmers and the rural people in agriculture, but there were also industries and there were also the usual. And the way it was set up was serve the people in this area called North Dakota. And if you make any money, here comes the good part, if you're profitable, that profit goes into the budget of the state of North Dakota, which means it has to raise fewer taxes on the people and businesses of North Dakota because the bank servicing those same businesses and people made a profit, but that's not going to go into some private hustler's pocket. It's going to serve the people of North Dakota. And over the last 100 years, all of the private banks around the whole United States have waged one campaign after another to stop this because it's a dangerous example. And I'm here to tell you, even conservative Republicans don't touch that. The Democrats don't, the Republicans don't. It's like political third rail on the railroad system. Don't go near there. Anyone who attacked or tried to get the end of that system has been pushed aside by the people of North Dakota, and it's as successful today as it was 100 years ago, and never has the kinds of problems that we are regularly experiencing with our private banking system.
Now, I will 100% agree with them on that, right? Like, legitimately, like you could have, like fucking public banks. You could do these type of things. It's a bit of an issue, at the end of the day, right? When you go from having a very rural population who is relying upon the bank and its customers for the most part, or, like lending out to farms and lending out to, like manufacturers in the state or whatever it is. Like that's a different thing altogether, right? That's about maintaining stability in the system, right? And you're going to end up having a problem because the same people are going to get the loans repeatedly. You know what I'm saying? It's going to breed a whole bunch of bullshit. You know how that one works. But it's the same way with any other fucking bank at the end of the day, right? Your preferential treatment, But ultimately, you know what I'm saying? Like the people who live in, I forget the name of the city in fucking North Dakota. Like there's like one city, I think Sioux Falls, maybe, right? That might be South Dakota, right? Pierre, maybe North Dakota. I don't know, but yeah, like the people who live inside of the city in, North Dakota probably all bank with, fucking Citibank or like fucking Bank of America or whatever fucking, normal company that they bank with. and everybody else uses, like fucking a program like this. Because this is a good program for like fucking farmers and things of this nature who, especially like if you're trying to support your state agriculture and keep things, like what it is. I don't see a fucking problem with this. At the end of the day, like I don't, so it is what it is. But if you wanted to be able to have a bank that's going to invest in technology and things of this nature, how do you make the decision of who gets the fucking money, right? Because like when you're choosing with farmers and ag people, that's not a big deal. You're choosing with guys who are doing like fracking things or whatever. Even those fracking people were like they didn't go to North Dakota Bank for the fucking loan. They went to like fucking private industry to get the fucking loan, right? Because these individuals stood here and understood that like they had to like sit here and turn a fucking profit. And, like they were like fucking giant companies that did this. So, well, I don't say giant, but they were bigger companies that did this type of stuff. So anyway, man, listen, let's keep rocking.
And so, is that the only state that has a state bank? Is North?
Yes, it's the only state. Yeah, no, it's unbelievable, and I won't embarrass anybody by asking. Not that we could, but I'm not going to ask your audience. Raise your hand if you knew that this was going on.
I didn't.
Not only is it the only state, but there is really something, if not a conspiracy, well, then there's a comfortable decision by large numbers of our mass media not to make a big deal out of this, not to.
Look, the average person is borderline retarded, right? When it really comes down to it, let's not pretend that like this here is some fucking major conspiracy, all right? I asked somebody earlier, right? And I'm gonna ask you the same question: why are mammals named mammals? How do they say that? There's a few of you who got it right now. You know what I'm saying, you go, whatever. That's because I'm a Marian glands, like fucking like a titties, a Marian glands, right? Every mammal, suckles at a Marian gland when it was born. Basic. Like even the duck-billed platypus, even though like its fucking babies are born in eggs, they come out, they suckle at the fucking mammalian gland. That's why it's a weird fucking animal, right? But like legitimately, that's the basis, right? But people don't know these things because like people are fucking retarded. That's just how things work. I don't think just because like, oh man, we're not told about this. You're not told about this, man. Like a lot of things you're not fucking told about. There's a lot of things like you don't really put like into your fucking skull the way that you should. That has some very basic things about you. Like did 50 years ago there was like 80 different fucking types of apples and now there's only 5 today? Did you know that every apple today is a fucking clone? You literally can't grow an apple from an apple seed. You have to fucking clone the branch. A lot of things we don't know about. You know what I'm saying? Things that like we don't know. I just learned that one tonight. Let's keep rocking.
For example, take advantage of this moment with collapse of Silicon, collapse of Signature Bank, collapse of the Credit Suisse in Switzerland, to tell us all, gee, there is already another way to go. It's been in this country for over a century. It's a roaring success, and we are therefore going to tell you nothing about it.
So, without doing that, so in the short term, when SVB Bank and those other banks started failing, if you were the head of the person in charge, what would you have done? You would have covered the depositors or no?
Yes, I would have covered the depositors because otherwise you set up a cascading catastrophe that gets bigger literally by the hour. By the way, footnote, we're not out of the woods yet either. Far from it. But for the moment, you can at least take the
exact shit that I said. Exact same shit that I said. Identical. All right, legit. Let's keep
initial step of not penalizing the people who have put their life savings, their business capital, whatever else it is, into these banks, who assumed that there is this thing which we call in economics of banking fiduciary duty. In other words, if you've got other people's money, you're supposed to be super careful and cautious because you've been entrusted. It's one thing to risk your own, but you're not supposed to take undue risks. And there's a presumption. What was going on here was that an awful lot of people, not just the bankers themselves, but the supervisory apparatus that's supposed to regulate what we know is a constantly churning pit of either corruption or incompetence, those people were blind too at the Federal Reserve Bank in San Francisco. So the whole system, the private bank and the regulatory apparatus, really messed up. And look, people are saying these are small banks. They weren't. The Silicon Valley Bank is either the 15th or 16th largest bank in the United States. Signature was another one like that. These are not small banks. And already many other banks are shaking because of the fear of what their depositors may do if they get frightened about the security of what they have. And one more thing, Jimmy, look at this. This is another bailout. They're careful not to call it that, but we're bailing out another failed private enterprise using the government, its guarantees, its money, its resources, its time, its energy.
All right, so this here, you know what I'm saying? Like, okay, somebody bought SVB and Signature Bank, right? And yes, there was a bailout with that. But when it comes down to giving the financial, the depositors their money, that's not government. Right? I don't know. Okay, how do I put this? Banks pay in, right, to whatchamacallit. They pay into the FDIC, right? Every month they pay in a certain amount, right? Same way it's like you pay your fucking car insurance, right? Everybody else pays their fucking car insurance. So every time somebody wrecks, you know what I mean? Like, oh, you fucking get a goddamn check to fix your fucking car. Very basic thing. Insurance company paid for it. You know what I mean? Like, oh, but like, it wasn't the government that paid for it. You know, it wasn't like the overall insurance agency paid for it. All the insurance agencies, not just one of them paid for it. Right? So like the FDIC, which is a quasi-private fucking public fucking government agency, right? Like, it's like the Fed. It's the same type of thing, sort of, kind of, in a way. Right? It's a quasi-government agency. Right? It's like if the Congress needed money for something, they couldn't just go confiscate FDIC funds. Kind of where I'm at. Right, so, and the government didn't put any money into this. This money all came from the banks. So, no, it wasn't a bailout, a fucking public thing. Now, granted, are they paying more than they were supposed to? Yes. The government decided they're paying more than they were supposed to? Yes. Why is this? Because these cocksuckers haven't updated anything. It's like every other fucking problem we have in this goddamn country. Literally, nobody has been paying attention for 30 fucking years. Let's keep going, though.
Gee, wow. And we're not getting much for it since we're letting these banks continue. We're letting other banks buy them with no guarantee that the banks doing the buying are not going to do the same kind of behavior that they've all been doing for so long anyway. It's an amazing thing to watch.
Well, it's because this is what I try to tell people, is that they don't realize that, you know, our government, they think our government is regular corrupt. Like Joe Biden got his kid a no-show job at an energy board in Ukraine, or Donald Trump set up his kid with a business deal in Saudi Arabia. But what they don't realize is that the whole thing, every law that gets written, the whole Defense Department budget is nothing but corruption. What do you think $800 billion a year is going for a country? We have no enemies threatening us. We're surrounded by waters in Canada and Mexico. We have nobody threatening. We spend $1 trillion. We have 1,000 military bases. That's all corruption. Banking, the reason why banks keep failing every couple of years is because they own the politicians who write the regulations. And when the banks fail, the government comes in and fixes them, and nobody goes to jail. That's because we live in a 100% corrupt government. government. And why can they send $100 billion to another failing bank or to Ukraine, to another proxy war at the snap of a finger before they take half that money and fix homelessness in their own country? It's because there's no corruption greasing the wheels of fixing homelessness. That's why.
All right. So like, and I said this, and I'm gonna keep saying it. 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 Right. So like, I'm gonna tell you a story. Last night I was talking to somebody on Discord, right? And I went like, "Yo, listen, you know what I'm saying? Like we should, we went back in the kitchen, these type of things, things I usually say. Break washers and dry. I mean, like fucking. So like, females have fucking a purpose, right? They have something to do, And they go, well, if we did this, like fucking our country, like it would lose GDP. And I was like, I don't care. He said, how are we gonna pay our bills if we don't have GDP? That's the point. That's really it. The government all they care about is GDP. Because if they don't have GDP, they don't have tax money, they're not able to fucking pay for goddamn fucking all the loans that they have. GDP. GDP, 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 GDP. That's it, bro. GDP. That's the whole thing. That's it. And that's all they fucking see. That's all they know. That's all they care about. It's not that the government's corrupt. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And if you see me cough and grab my sidebrow, like I think I got a hernia, I'll be real. Like the fucking side is killing me. Or my appendix is gonna burst. One of the two. If you don't hear from me in a few days, I'm probably in the hospital. It is what it is. All right. No, but I'm toughing it out. It's not a really big deal. Let's keep rocking. All right.
And
can't
people
make as much money in it.
That's right. That's right. I mean, if we could bomb the homeless, there's always money for that. So now, but you have no other choice. So the reason
By the way, Jimmy, if I could just add one thing, because it just amplifies your point. We're supposed to be a country that is worried about a big other problem they haven't solved called inflation. Prices are going up. Everybody knows it. The supermarket, the gas station, wherever you turn, we are suffering because wages are not going up as fast as prices, and therefore our standard of living is being squeezed. Okay, what's the worst thing you can do if there's already rising prices? Answer. Pour money into the system, new, fresh money. It's like pouring kerosene on a fire that you want to go out. That's not a good method. So look what happens here. The people pull their deposits out of those failing banks. They still have that money. They're going to put it in another bank. That money is there. But now the government comes in and says, we'll cover. Don't you worry, all you people. We're basically going to give these banks a ton of new money at the Federal Reserve to use to cover all. That's more money. Mm-hmm. You're pumping more money. The same government that wants to curtail inflation is boosting the inflation by its method of trying to solve the banking problem. What you begin to see is we are so far down the path of economic decline that we're like a very old sick person. We have too many diseases, and the attempt to solve one clashes with the medicine for the other one. At a certain point, the doctors say, hey, we're beyond ability to save this patient. Your frustration with what you just said, that's a rational response to a network of problems that are now feeding on each other. We can't solve one without worsening it. If you hear the excuse of the bankers, it was the interest rates going up that had a part to do with their collapse. Yeah, but we raised interest rates to try to deal with the inflation. Now we got to deal with the banks in a way that worsens the inflation.
Pay attention. Pay the fuck attention to this part. This is the part that scared the shit out of me, right? Legitimately, it's been bothering me all goddamn night, right? Legitimately, right? And I got something to tell you at the end of this. That like, yo, stick around. If you're still here, stick around. Believe me, I got something to tell you at the end of this. It's gonna be fucking insane, right? What the hell they're trying to do?
It's becoming literally ridiculous.
So, in order to curtail inflation, which was brought on in large part by them dumping trillions of dollars into the economy, not into the workers' pockets, but
Right.
into people who put that money into Wall Street and what have you.
Right.
So that causes inflation. So now to curtail inflation, they rise interest rates. Interest rates now make those banks fail because the banks put all their money into bonds that are low interest rates long term.
Right.
And
so they go down in value when they raise the interest rate.
So those go down in value. So now they can't, when somebody comes to withdraw their money, they have to cash in those bonds to pay that money. And those bonds are now worthless because of the interest rates being so high. So now, so they're trying to curb inflation. They raise interest rates, makes the banks fail. So in order to fix the banks, they throw money at the banks, which causes more inflation.
Right. It's really, you kind of throw up your hands that otherwise intelligent people who understand these things. You know, it's the first, I've taught these courses. The first semester of a banking course, you learn about the interest rate goes up and the value of the bond goes down. That's not rocket science. That's not an advanced understanding. Anybody in a bank who runs a bank knows it. That they're the institutions that buy those long-term bonds, the major ones, on and on. There's no excuse for any of this. By the way, if I have a moment, let me do two things that you may find humorous. Okay.
Okay.
The first one is, when I got my PhD in economics to be a professor at Yale University years ago. And in my class with me at the same time that I got my PhD at Yale University was a young woman who went and had the same courses, the same lectures, everything as I did. Her name was Janet Yellen. That's right. So I can assure you she knows about rising interest rates and falling bonds. She knows everything that I know because we were taught literally the same thing by the same professor at the same time. So I'm looking at a system that is so out of control that a perfectly well-educated economist like herself is at a loss of kind of what to do. And then it gets even weirder, because here's what we learned. When you have an inflation, there are multiple different ways that societies have used.
Now, this is something I didn't know, you know what I mean, that I actually was educated on by this video. I mean, I had no idea that this was a thing. So, like, yo, again, pay attention and stick around, because I got something on the end of this motherfucker. It's going to fuck everybody up. Let's keep going.
To try to cope with inflation. Raising interest rates has never been the only one. It has never been the one that you just do. That's crazy. So I'm watching this woman who knows better up there talking like Mr. Powell does, as if this were the only thing to do. Let me give you an example. August 15th, 1971, President Richard M. Nixon gets on the radio and television, and here's what he says to the American people. We have a bad inflation, which we did at that time, and it has to be stopped, which it did at that time. And I'm going to do what has to be done, which he did at that time. Here's what he said. If anyone, as of when I stop speaking now, if any business raises its price of anything it sells, we will come for you, we will arrest you, and you're going to jail. Any union or organization of workers that tries to push up wages, we will do the same. This thing was called a wage price freeze. It didn't happen in another country. It happened in the U.S. when a conservative Republican president did this, okay? So anyone who says raising interest rates is what you have to do, that's not true. And both
All right. So here's the thing. I don't think they could politically do it. I don't think they had the political power. I mean, like, I understand, like, everybody goes, so they're like gods, you know, they can do whatever they want. No. They couldn't do it. There's no fucking way. It's not even remotely a possibility that these individuals could even fathom being able to do this. Because I'm gonna tell you what, when Richard Nixon, you go look up an election map of Richard Nixon, right, and you'll see that like literally the entire country, but like 2 states voted for him when he got elected. Like that's just reality. It's a much different situation now. If Biden said this is a wage price freeze, right? If it's even just a price freeze, the open revolts in the fucking streets. Promise. January 6th would mean nothing. No fucking way. People would flat close fucking business. Straight up. There's not they don't have the fucking ability to enforce something like that. They don't even have there's not a chance, right? Because even like population wise, when Richard Nixon was president, we had like 100 million people in the fucking country. And today it's 360 million or 330 million, whatever the fuck. It's not even a fucking possibility. There's no way. They can't enforce anything in this fucking country. The only reason anything works, I'm gonna keep this always. Only reason you even pay taxes, like real shit, only reason you pay taxes, because everybody goes along with it. Everybody just said fuck you. There's nothing they could do. 80,000 IRS agents versus 300 million people. How's those numbers work out? They don't even have enough ammo. Reality. And people are beginning to notice this. Like it's not. This would never work. Let's keep going though.
Mr. Powell and Janet Yellen know that because they learned it the same way I did. And there are other policies.
Unfortunately, Janet Yellen and Mr. Jerome Powell, right? Janet Yellen's the Treasury Secretary. Jerome Powell is the Federal Reserve Chairman. They don't actually run anything. They have no power to do any of these things. Right? The only power they have is to raise interest rates. That's it. That's literally it. Like, they have no power. Like they're not president. They're not king. They're not fucking even congressman. They have less power than any of them. I know you think Federal Reserve scary. Ooh, it's really just a trick to fool dumb people. Right? So the Americans can go so the American government can go, we don't know the money. The Fed does. Fed's the cucked husband of the gold digging American wife. Reality, bro. Let's keep going.
They all have strengths and weaknesses. I'm not arguing do A or don't do B, but to act the way this country does, as if raising interest rates is the only thing we can do, that is a lie. That is not true. And that's a disservice to the American people because we don't have any discussion or debate about which of these policies we want to use. Had we not raised interest rates, for example, we would not have plunged these banks into this kind of crisis. That'd be an interesting aspect of making a decision about what policy to use. And if we really care about the inequality of income, what we could have done is freeze the prices, allow the wages to go up a little bit, and that would have done a good bit to correct the inequality that has gotten so much worse in recent decades.
Kurt, go ahead.
Was the goal to ruin those banks? I know it sounds suspicious, like it sounds conspiratorial, but is that the idea? We want to kill those banks?
So, I mean, it's an obvious question.
Y'all pay attention. This is literally like the part that I thought was like the most important, right? At the end of the day, like this is like, I know I said this, a minute ago, but I've been talking, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, fuck it. You know, this is the part that I'm just like, fuck. You know what I mean? Like, fuck. This is fucking crazy. Let's rock.
Question, right? So if Janet Yellen knows this, that raising those interest rates are going to cause some banks to fail, and yet they do it anyways, what could possibly be the thinking there?
Yeah, look at them.
I hate to say it because I don't mean to frighten people, but I got to be honest with you. Otherwise, you're not going to invite me back here. I think they're desperate. I don't think they take the time. I don't think they take the space. This inflation, let me remind you,
Did you hear what my man just said? I'm going to play it for you again, bro, because this is important.
are going to cause some banks to fail, and yet they do it anyways. What could possibly be the thinking there?
I hate to say it because I don't mean to frighten people, but I got to be honest with you. Otherwise, you're not going to invite me back here. I think they're desperate. I don't think they take the time. I don't think they take the space. This inflation, let me remind you, when the inflation began, which was already late 2021, early 2022, the Federal Reserve officially told us not to worry. It's not going to be severe. It isn't going to last. It's nothing. They kept that story up until it was so obviously wrong that they had to do something, and now they had waited, and they did what they felt they could do right there on the spot. They probably don't want the political storm. Business doesn't want to be told you can't raise your prices. They yelled and screamed at Nixon when he did it, but they behaved. The inflation came down. It's not a policy that doesn't have a lot to say for it. But I don't think they wanted the time. They didn't want to debate. They wanted to get in there and stop what had become a serious political and economic problem that they had waited too long to deal with.
Okay.
Right? They're desperate. They painted themselves into a fucking corner. Joe Biden came out and said, I'm freezing prices, and they'd laugh at him, or like, yeah, shut the fuck up. Like, nobody's gonna listen to you. Right, legitimately. All right, so check this out. They've instilled 40-year mortgages. I'll repeat that again. They now have 40-year mortgages. You're going to have your kid as a fucking co-signer, as a toddler, when you fucking take out this mortgage. 40-year fucking mortgages. They're kicking the can down the goddamn road. Quite literally. Like, literally, they're kicking the can down the fucking road. And, I mean, this could be a good thing, because, like, families are going to have to get together and go, well, you're going to be responsible for, like, this house when I'm gone, because there's no way I'm going to be able to pay this motherfucker to fuck off. 40-year mortgage. Let me repeat that. 40-year fucking mortgages. Welcome to 2023, my friends. I'm Piece of Pnoid News. I hope you enjoyed. I'm up out of here.